What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we're going to be starting our playoff previews. And with the first matchup of the 2024 NHL playoffs that's officially been announced. Now, I know the Jets and the Avalanche were announced, I believe, 2 days ago, but we're still waiting to see who's going to be at home between those two teams. But we have our first official matchup that was announced by the NHL officially yesterday, and that is the Carolina Hurricanes taking on the New York Islanders. So we're going to jump into this video. We're going to talk a little bit about the Hurricanes, a little bit about the Islanders, their head-to-head matchups, and also just determining at the end of this video who we think is going to go through between both teams and in how many games do we think that the series is going to last. So before we, jump into this video, I just want to say, best of luck in the NHL playoffs to every single one of those teams, to the fan bases whose teams are in the playoffs. Have fun, enjoy yourselves. And for me and Zach, we're going to enjoy watching the draft lottery to see which of our teams is going to get potentially and hopefully the first overall pick.
Slacking for Macklin.
There you go, slacking for Macklin. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. We're going to start with the Carolina Hurricanes and their season stats. They're going to be the home team in these playoffs. They finished second in the Metropolitan Division with 111 points this season. Their coach is Rod Brindamore. Their record was 52, 22, and 7. And they are seventh in the league in goals forward, third in the league in goals against with 210 goals against, 276 goals forward. Looking a little bit at their roster, a little bit the acquisitions that they've made. They got rid of Michael Bunting in a trade that they brought in Jake Gensel. And they also brought in Evgeny Kuznetsov, who they brought in from the Washington Capitals. They also made kind of an acquisition in the sense that they didn't really have Freddie Anderson for most of the season, so they were playing with four goalies. Peter Kochetkov, Antti Ranta, Spencer Martin, and obviously Yaniv Peretz. And Freddie Anderson has come back from injury, so for us, that considers more of a internal, internal trade or an internal addition to the team. So looking at this and looking at the Carolina Hurricanes, I'm just going to kind of jump right into this and basically say the Hurricanes are a great team. Like, you watch them play, you watch their team, you watch their way they're coached. They're fantastic. They play a really interesting style of hockey. It's a little bit more defensive than some people would like, but listen, it works. And they've gotten some great production from a lot of good players. Sebastian Aho's had a fantastic season. Seth Jarvis, 33 goals, 67 points. He's been great. Necas hasn't really hit his stride this season, but still 53 points in 76 games is really good. And then, they've had some defensive points from Brady Shea, Brett Burns, and obviously Jacob Slavin. And, Evgeny Svechnikov, 52 points in 59 games in the games he's been healthy. But the biggest addition and probably the biggest reason as to where they are right now and the reason why I think a lot of people are excited about them is Jake Gensel. 17 games played with the Carolina Hurricanes, 25 points. He was their marquee acquisition at the trade deadline. So, Zach, what do you think of Carolina, their forward core, and just their team in general, and just kind of, this matchup with the Islanders and starting off a little bit with the Hurricanes?
Well, we have a Carolina team who's going to finish off the regular season, first and foremost, with about the same number of points that they finished with last year.
Right.
But their situation is a little bit different now because if we track back to last year, on March 11th, they lose Svechnikov to an ACL injury. Overall, that team was a little bit more on the injured list, if you would say, going into the playoffs. They lost Freddie Anderson as well. But this year they got Freddie Anderson back, and they've had him, like you mentioned, for about 13 games or so. And They have a healthy roster going into this playoffs. And I'd argue that their team is better just based off of the addition of Jake Gensel alone. Jake Gensel was as advertised. They acquire him at the trade deadline. He's been basically lighting it up. They add a co-star for Sebastian Aho, who's a star himself. They have a bunch of great complementary scoring pieces on this team. Their blue line is still terrific as ever. There was the addition of Orlov in the offseason. And if you look at their three deep pairings, you have Slavin and Burns, which is, it's if you depending on which metrics you're looking at, their expected goals over average has been okay as a first pairing, but Slavin is a known top end shutdown defenseman, and Brent Burns has been doing his thing offensively for a while now. Pesci and Orlov. I don't think that's the pairing that they're gonna go with. In more recent games here, it's been Orlov and Chatfield on the third pairing, what makes a very formidable third pairing. Probably one of the best in league. It could be a second pairing on most teams. And they've had Pesci alongside. Refresh me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's been Brady Shea who's been back
Yeah.
alongside of him.
Right.
So this is a team. Before you chime in, this is a team from top to bottom that's absolutely stacked. They've added a 1B for Sebastian Aho. They've been getting the goaltending now with Freddie Anderson down the stretch because Kochekov hasn't been great this year. I think they asked a little bit too much from him. It's affected their style of play in many ways. They've played, very very Rob Brindamore like, very tight kind of trappy game. But I think now with a guy like Freddie Anderson, they could kind of sit back a little bit less and really let the stars fly out there. And I think that gives them the group a nice boost going into the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I would disagree with the Kochetkov thing. I think Kochetkov's had a fine season, considering the fact that Anderson's been out for most of the year, and Ranta's been bad. I mean, 872, 299, one shutout. He was really bad in his time with Carolina. But Kochetkov, I think, held the fort, 911, 233, four shutouts. He's played decent hockey when called upon, and he was the starter for most of the season before Anderson got hurt. Spencer Martin, who they got off waivers, was 4-0-1 in his 5 starts with the Hurricanes, 922 save percentage. So he was reliable during the absence of Freddie Anderson. But for me, I think there's a clear game one starter, and that's Freddie Anderson. And since he's come back from injury, he's been nothing short of spectacular. 3 shutouts, 932 save percentage, 184 goals against average. And he's going to be the main reason why I think Carolina is going to be a threat. You look at their offensive core with Sebastian Aho, obviously, their D core with Brady Shea, Brett Burns, and Jacob Slavin, and obviously the acquisition of Jake Gensel. This is a team that we all know what they're capable of doing, right? Last year, they struggled to score goals, and I think that was the reason why they got eliminated by Florida, was because they weren't able to put the puck in the net, and they struggled in adding a supporting cast or adding secondary scoring. This year, they bring in Jake Gensel, they bring in Kuznetsov, who, is not necessarily known for being a goal scorer, but is able to create offense and, can be a really good playmaker. And if you put him with, guys like Seth Jarvis or even a guy like Teuvo Teravainen, who's got 23 goals this year, you'll get some production out of him. So I do think that Carolina, are better suited, like you said early on, than they were last year going into the playoffs. But one of the things that I do want to talk about is this is a team that's filled with depth, right? Like if you look at just scoring 10, 11, and even 12. Stefan Nason, 14 goals, Martinook, 14 goals, Jordan Stahl with 10, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who has 11. He's been a healthy scratch for most of the season. There's a chance he might not even start game 1 of the playoffs for Carolina. But that's another conversation in the sense that I don't think he hasn't had a great season at all. But they have had depth scoring from other guys in their lineup, like Stefan Nason, like Jordan Martinook, like Jordan Stahl, who have been really good complementary guys for them on their third and fourth lines. And they can be guys that they can rely upon if they ever need, a depth goal, or if they ever need a big goal in the game. You can rely on those 3 guys. So I do think, Carolina's in a very good position here. I like their team. I like the way they're built. If you look at their D-core, obviously Brady Shea's not on it because he's coming back from injury, but he would be on this D-core ahead of Tony DeAngelo. That's a fantastic D-core. And if you look at their offensive core, I mean, just based on projections, your first line is Sebastian Aho, Jake Gensel, Seth Jarvis. Your second line can be looked at differently with, obviously Teravainen's not on this list, but Teravainen would likely play with Jordan Stahl and, let's say, Andrei Svechnikov. Your third line would probably be like Martinook with Nechas and, let's say, Drury, and then your fourth line is probably Stefan Nason, Evgeny Kuznetsov, Jesper Fast. You can argue Jesperi Kotkaniemi too. Like I've just named like 14 forwards that could play on this
Yeah,
team.
they have options galore here. All guys run
Right.
more than NHL capable.
Exactly. So I do think that this team is ready to go. What I want to jump into, and the team that I really want to jump into, is the New York Islanders. And the reason I want to jump into the New York Islanders is because this is a team that I think when we look at, let's say, regular season, 92 points this year, they lost 16 games in overtime. People can argue they probably shouldn't have deserved to be there. But one of the things that I will say is that I think that the hiring of Patrick Waugh made a huge difference to this team. And you look at Carolina, we've talked about how good Carolina's been, how great they've been, their team on paper. They were second in the Metro, just behind the Rangers. The Islanders, I think, have changed their style of play under Patrick Waugh, right? For years, they've been known as, a defensive team. They were a defensive team under Barry Trotz. They were a defensive team under Lane Lambert. But Patrick Waugh's got them playing different hockey, and they've got them playing some fun hockey. They're a team that is better in their own zone, but not only that, they're better in the offensive zone. They're more creative. They score more goals. They're not afraid to jump up into the play and create some chances and be more offensive. And you look at their goals forward, 241, 23rd in the league. There was a period under Lane Lambert where they were 28th, 29th in the league. So the fact that they've moved up even 6 spots from when Patrick Waugh got hired, I think is all you pretty much need to know. And then, 259 goals against average, 19th in the league in scoring. That I think has to do with a lot more of the fact that they've, dealt with, some injuries on defense and also their goaltending not always being up to par. Looking at their goaltending, let's talk about it. Ilya Sorokin, 908 save percentage, 2 shutouts, 299 goals against average. Listen, it hasn't been his best season. He hasn't really played up to standards, but he's still Ilya Sorokin, and we know what he's capable of doing in the playoffs. I think he's going to be an interesting case to watch out for. But, they've gotten good goaltending from Semyon Varlamov. 14 wins, 8 losses, 4 overtime losses, 917 save percentage. So they've gotten decent goaltending from him. And obviously, they're big players for them, for the Islanders. Matt Barzal, 80 points in 80 games. Noah Dobson, 70 points in 79 games. And Bo Horvat and Brock Nelson, 68 points and 67 points, respectively, in their own right. So, Zach, just talk to me a bit about the Islanders. What are your thoughts? And what do you think about the acquisition of Patrick Waugh? We've already kind of mentioned it when they were talking about it, if they were going to make the playoffs. Now they're officially in, and they're taking on the Hurricanes. How do you think that's going to look like?
Well, when the move happened, bringing in Patrick Roy, I love the move for them, and I just love the fact that he's back in the league because he's, in his own right. It hasn't been in the NHL for the past couple of years. It's been with the Rampart in Quebec, and he's done a phenomenal job with that program. They've turned into a perennial winner over the past couple of years there, and now he's. I can deduct now and say after numerous games of him in charge of the bench with the Islanders is that he's added a different element to their team. And if you look at the production value from some of their star forwards, Matthew Barzal has exploded offensively since Patrick Roy arrived. Noah Dobson he's been having a great offensive year to begin with, but his production kind of stagnated for a little bit. The team that was, naturally with a team that wasn't scoring a lot of goals. He's another one, and just their top offensive guys have really benefited from Patrick Roy. And you mentioned it before, their team offense moved up by a couple of points. But I wanted to point attention to their goaltending. Semyon Varlamov, has been great in his backup role, but Sorokin, despite his 907 at the moment, if you look at his numbers from the month of April, which has been a critical stretch for them, having to clinch a playoff spot, he's posted a 944 save percentage in this month of April. So you have an Ilya Sorokin who is going into the playoffs on top of his game, and for the Hurricanes, I think that is something that's definitely worrisome for them. I think Carolina is a great team, but if you look at the playoff series from last year, these two teams met in a series that lasted 6 games. 2 of which were stolen by Ilya Sorokin, and a bunch of other games where he played exceptionally well in. So you know, with a guy like him going into playoff series, you have a chance in pretty much every game. Um, Other than that, for the Islanders, they're a team that is gritty. That has always been a part of their identity, especially in the past couple of years with Patrick Roy. They're still gonna um, be playing that, that Long Island style of hard nosed hockey, and it's displayed with their role players especially. But this is a team that has offensive pieces. This is not just a team that is gonna win based on brutality. This is a team that has some really good offensive players. I've mentioned their names before. Another player to note here, Brock Nelson has been fantastic down the stretch. Has been getting a goal pretty much anytime they've needed one from him. So
Yeah.
now, if we move things to the head-to-head matchup between these two teams, I think it's a very interesting playoff matchup. I mentioned before that last year they met in the playoffs. They also met a couple years prior to that, where Carolina swept them. I believe it was in 2019.
Yeah.
And so these are two teams, right, in the Metropolitan Division that have a history. Despite this playoff format of being able to meet each other in the playoffs, this is now the third time in the past couple of years here. And this year they've split actually the regular season series. I don't know if you wanted to touch up on that.
Yeah, so basically that's it. They've split the regular season series 2-2. Basically, the Islanders and the Canes played 4 times. The Islanders went 2-1-1, meaning they won 2 games, lost one in regulation, lost one in a shootout, but technically both teams won 2 games apiece. Because in the playoffs we don't look at overtime and shootout losses. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, a win is a win, right? What's interesting, and I actually want to bring this up. So if I look at the stats right now, it's been pretty even all around, right? 2 wins for either team, 16 goals forward, 14 goals against. This is the Carolina against the Islanders, right? So very evenly matched between these two teams. And if you look at if there's any indication from the previous playoffs, Carolina swept them in 2019. In last year in 2023, 4-2 victory for the Carolina Hurricanes. We know what they're capable of doing, and these two teams are very good defensively. One of the things that I got to say, though, is with the Islanders, there's always that sense of a feeling that if this team can get past the first round, they can go pretty far. And the reason why is because I've always been a big believer in defense wins you championships. And I do think that as much as Carolina has probably one of the best defensive cores in the league, I do think that the Islanders play a style that sometimes is more suited for a playoff role compared to, let's say, a lot of other teams in the NHL. And I'm not saying that Carolina doesn't play that style. What I'm saying is that the Islanders have proven time and time again that their style in the playoffs seems to work. They've done it. They made it to the conference final 2 years in a row where they lost to Tampa, right? So clearly it's an effective method. And the thing with Carolina is it's always felt like they've not struggled against the Islanders, but they've always seemed to have a hard time. Even when they swept them 4-0 in 2019, it wasn't an easy playoff series for them, right? They struggled to find a way to score goals. They were still run into by hot goaltending. So they never were able to fully, let's say not fully grasp and get rid of the Islanders, but they weren't able to have a situation where it's like, oh, they walked through them like it was nothing. Like, no,
I mean, they swept them. They swept them.
Yeah,
So they
swept
did.
them.
Every playoff game is going to be tight regardless. But
Yeah,
they did sweep them that year. And the Islanders, um, you
I
know,
guess.
I disagree with you because I think the way they've been playing the past couple of years, that style could only take you so far. Because
I guess.
regardless of how things are going to go, you're going to end up playing the top teams, the offensive juggernauts. And believe it or not, in the playoffs, when it's your star power is elevated, just based on the fact that your star players are getting the even more ice time than they get in the regular season. That's why they're your stars, because you want to rely on them during the biggest moments. And so if it's stars, your best players going toe to toe, it hasn't been in the favor of the Islanders, and that's why you have a situation like that where they've been swept, or in a series last year where they could have been swept if it wasn't for bad goaltending. But
Yeah.
The difference now is that this is a team in Long Island that has they added excuse me, Bo Horvat in that span. Matthew Barzal has been playing up to his potential, which is fantastic. But if you look at their depth scoring, you cannot compare this team to Carolina.
No, you can't.
Like at all.
It's true.
You talked
You're
about
right.
how they have 14 forwards that could crack any lineup, and some they have to hold out of their own lineup. If you compare them, for these forward cores and these D cores from top to bottom, the talent is all in Carolina's favor here, and I think that's something that could definitely get exposed. But the Islanders are playing great, so it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with a team like Carolina, because yes, they split the regular season series, but that doesn't mean anything going into the playoffs. The playoffs are a different ball game where the intensity is higher, and a lot of the regular season situations have to be thrown out of the window here.
Yeah, I do agree. I think to some extent, obviously you look at it from Carolina's perspective. Like, Carolina's better than them on paper in every aspect. I think you can argue maybe in net there could be a conversation that can be had, even though Freddie Anderson's had a fantastic season and Sorokin struggled. I do think that you can still have that conversation as to who's better in net, even if you go based off recency bias, then yes, Freddie's been better. But I do think Sorokin has proven that he's capable of doing it in the playoffs. That being said, though, you are right in the sense that, Carolina's much better and are probably better suited than the Islanders. And I do think that as much as I like Patrick Roy, and I will be rooting for the Islanders in the playoffs, I do think I have to go with Carolina here. They're built from top to bottom. They're built like a contender. They're built like a team that is just going to come in and just absolutely run over you like it's nothing. And for me, the biggest reason why I'm going to choose them is because Freddie Anderson is playing like a Vezina candidate. And although he's not eligible to win the Vezina, he's been fantastic. And the acquisition of Jake Gensel might be what actually gets Carolina to potentially a cup final and maybe even wins them the cup. I think that was probably the biggest move that they've made. That's probably the best move that they've made. And I do think that in the end, it's going to get Carolina as far as possible. I'm gonna say this. I think Carolina's gonna win this series. I don't think it's gonna be as easy as people think it is, but I will say Carolina's gonna win this series in 6 games. I think if the Hurricanes do, I think if the Islanders do win games, it'll be because Sorokin stood on his head and the Islanders were able to find a way to squeak 2 wins here and there. But I do think Carolina's just got too much star power, too much firepower. And I do think that it's not going to be a walk in the park, but I do think Carolina is going to find a way to do this and move on to the next round. So I will be rooting for the Islanders. I want Patrick Roy to win. I wish him nothing but success.
Typical Habs fan.
Well, no, I like Patrick Roy. I've always been a fan of Patrick Roy, even although, yes, him having Habs history and being a part of the Habs history and if, being one of the best goaltenders of all time, like that obviously plays a role in it. But, I've always liked him as a coach. I've always respected him as a player, even if I never really got to watch him as a kid, watching highlights and hearing stories. Like, you gain respect for a player like that. And, I've always liked the style that he had, even when he was with Quebec and the Rampards. And I think that his style is meant to be in the NHL. So I do want to root for the Islanders. And I think that to some extent, I do think that if the Islanders get a better team in the near future, they can definitely be a force to be reckoned with Patrick Roy as coach. But with that being said, like I said, Carolina, you can't overlook Carolina. Like, as much as I want to, and I'm trying to find a reason for the Islanders to win this series, it's hard for me to even do that, even as a person trying to root for them. Like, Carolina's just built from top to bottom like a team that's ready to win the cup, and that's the honest truth. So I have to go with Carolina in this series.
Yeah, well, they're a team that made the conference finals last year against Florida. The year before, correct me if I'm wrong, they did. I think they played in the conference finals against Tampa, or were they?
I don't remember. I can actually check that. Give me a second.
Yeah, I'll check it on my end.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but But
But
yeah, they were.
I'll let you pull it up. But despite that, I think the past 2 years they've gotten really close. This is a team that wants to at least make the Stanley Cup Finals this year. They're a team that's been
Yeah.
perennially successful since the 2019 season, in the regular season, multiple 100-point years, and a team that is they've always had one of the strongest rosters in the league, led by a great coach who has inspired the group in Rob Brindamore, and they fulfilled their need here with Jake Gensel. And they added
Right.
another big piece, Dmitry Orlov, with great playoff experience. You have Jake Gensel, who scored 13 goals in the 2017 series that helped the Pens win the cup, and a guy like Dmitry Orlov, who won it with the Caps year later. So, they did every move they could to put this team in the best position, and now it's just about playing the part. And I don't think a team like the Islanders, regardless if they're playing well or not under Patrick Roy, I don't think that the team like the Islanders are going to stay in their way. I say this is going to be a 5-game series. It's gonna probably be tightly contested in most games, but in most of those games, giving the edge to Carolina nonetheless.
Yeah, and in 5 games, you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looking at the Carolina Hurricanes, just playoff history. So last year they lost in the conference final to the Florida Panthers. The year before that, they lost in the second round. In 2021, they lost in the second round. And then in 2019-20, they lost in the first round. And in 2018-19, the year that they beat the Islanders in 4 games, they actually went to the conference final. So what we're looking at here, just based on history, is that if the Hurricanes beat the New York Islanders, they're going to the conference final, because both times they beat the Islanders, they went to the conference final. So essentially, Carolina's key to success in these playoffs, or to get over the hump, is to beat the Islanders, go to the conference final, and hopefully win to get to the Stanley Cup final. So, no, but with that being said, yeah, I agree with every point you've made. I think Carolina's gonna find a way to do this. I think in 6 games, just because I always like to predict long series. I don't like predicting sweeps and games in 5, just because I personally, as a fan, don't like it. Like, I think it's always fun to see a team go to 6 or 7. So that's why I like predicting longer and bigger scores, just because I like the playoffs to last longer. But with that being said, I can definitely see a situation where the Carolina Hurricanes win in 5. I don't see it going to 7. I think it's likely going to be that the Islanders either win 1 or 2 games. So either 5 or 6 is perfect for the Islanders. So, or for the Hurricanes. So that's it, and that's pretty much all I have to say. I think we've pretty much touched on everything. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think it's going to be a pretty definitive series. So we both agree on the Hurricanes here. We think they're destined for a big playoff run. Obviously, for the Islanders, it was a nice step for them getting back into the playoffs this year, and a first year with a new head coach. They definitely have something to build on with Patrick Roy. I think he's going to be the man for them in the future, and I'm very happy. And Islanders fans should be happy by the way they ended the regular season. So, on that note, once again, guys, thanks for watching. We're going to be dropping a bunch of these playoff series matchups as the matchups are released. We're still awaiting some of the results from the remaining regular season games. The playoffs will debut on Saturday, and we'll have all the first round matchups covered for you guys to watch. So drop a like on this video, drop a comment, subscribe to our channel, follow our socials. And this has been Zach.
And Luca.
So thanks for watching our video, guys. Peace.
Peace.